my gallows and build them high. Makes a long time climbing before I die. I want the chance to spit in his eye. Oh, well, they gave me bars, but I can see between to a dusty yard and a long gone green. They call that freedom, if you know what I mean. And I drive myself.
Right, hello everybody, welcome to Longbangers. This is episode 64. I'm Mathie. We've got a special guest on today, but we'll start by introducing the normal panel first, who are special in their own way. We have the sturdy, chunky Kevin Nisbet. John, how are you?
Curvy Kevin Nisbet. I'm good, thank you. I'm not going to ask how you are because I don't care. So move on.
Wow. And we've got Paul Scranlin. Craig, how are you doing?
Aye, good mate, aye. No, not too bad.
Recovered for your run in the rain?
Aye, embarrassing. Like, I should just pack it in, to be fair. I'm just fat and unfit, so...
Aye, join the club.
I'll drink for
that. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm fine, and I'm on my best behaviour tonight.
Yep, tell us why you're on your best behaviour, Brian.
Because you're about to introduce our next guest.
We have Hibs Sporting Director, Graeme Mathie, on the line as well. Graeme, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Good, Matty. How are you guys? You doing okay?
All good.
Yep.
Graeme, is your job the most important job at Easter Road after Scott Allen's hairdresser?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know why you started with a hair one, Matty, because that's my first observation. From being at Hibs nearly 6 years now, I started with a full head of hair, and now I'm in desperate need of somebody more appropriate than Scott Allen's hairdresser. That's for sure.
Well, mine's just gone completely white now, and I don't know if that's contributed to watching Hibs. I'm only 21.
Stone.
Fair enough. So, right, well, we're on the back of another win, 1-0 at St Johnstone on Saturday. So, we're not going to spend too much time talking about the game. But Graeme, what did you think of it?
I think I must admit my biggest learning about people always ask about the job of a sporting director, and you can get involved in conversations. It's a lot about long-term planning and strategy and everything. But see, when the first team wins on a Saturday, everything's great. So we're delighted to come off the back of another win and a good start to the season. So in that instance, everything at the club's great. Nobody wants to know too much about anything else that's going on, and long may it continue. So fingers crossed the boys can keep the run going.
I think that's podcast pretty much wrapped up for the night there. And how would you summarise the season so far, Graeme?
No, I think it's probably. I'll speak quite a bit, I guess, about what's been the case over the summer, and I think what you're seeing just now is absolutely been part of that. So a really good squad of players who are also fantastic human beings who have worked incredibly hard for each other all summer, and you're now seeing the same thing on the pitch, and delighted for them and Jack and his staff that are getting the just rewards of that with some great results. Nice one,
Brian. What about you? What did you think of the game on Saturday?
Apart from the fact it was Sunday.
I saw that. So every other week with my work, I get a 4-day weekend. Like 4-day weeks. So kind of rotate whether you're working Monday to Thursday or Tuesday to Friday. And this was my long weekend. So I have no idea what day it actually is at the moment as a result.
It was it was 3 points. I think they were very good at the football taking place, if I can say that. I think they were very good at the sort of stop-start, turning it a wee bit scrappy. I don't think Hibs were brilliant performance-wise, but I think the most reassuring fact is that Jack Ross himself sees that. I think if he had come out on Sunday after the game and said, that was like the famous 5 all over again, for example, it would maybe raise an alarm or two. But we're winning games. We're not at our best, but I think if we look at Scottish football in the bigger picture, I don't think any team's at their best. Since we've emerged from lockdown, I don't think anybody's found their flow or found their stride yet. So the fact that we're not firing on all cylinders and we're sitting with 13 points out of 15, even I can't complain with that.
What the hell? Craig, what about you?
It wasn't like the kind of the spectacle that you always want to see, like, you know, that like their excitement and all that, with the exception of the late goal. But I think it's good to see, like Brian was saying, that we might not be firing on all cylinders attacking wise and that, you know, but these teams that we're coming up against, it's not that they're playing bad, they're tough teams to play, and week in, week out, the defence for me have been sterling, that knocking everything away. And all right, there was a offside goal that's went our way, like, you know, but I just think that the solid foundation that we've got at the back's allowing us to steal these points. I mean, how many times have we said it where we've played wonderful football and we've lost late goals, or, you know, or we've been playing brilliantly but we've just not been able to put it in the back of the net, and we've been crying out for just a bit of stability to allow maybe a bit of luck to come into it. And maybe it was luck, maybe it wasn't, but it's good to see that the team are winning. Especially because I think watching the game, where there was a few chances, like, you know, and both teams had a few chances, I think maybe we edged it overall. But what I like to see as well is it was a penalty that came from, was it a corner or was it after the corner the cross had came in?
Corner, Gogic heads onto the post and kind of hooks it back into play, and I think it was Porteous gets fouled.
Aye, and it's like the 91st minute, and it's like that team spirit to, you know, keep fighting to the very, very last minute, and you deserve it in the end. And for Stevie Malin to come back after all the trouble that he's had and step up and take a pressure penalty as cool as he did, it's great to see him.
And John, we've talked about the defence before, so again, the defending was probably the backbone to that victory. What
Was
are your
that a
thoughts
question
on
or
it?
a statement?
Well, what are your thoughts on that?
So I was on Twitter this morning, maybe this afternoon, talking about the impact that Gogic and Newell have in helping out the two fullbacks in particular. I think we've talked a wee bit about Dougie Tripod and the support that Stevenson will be giving him behind the scenes. But I think in the centre-half pairing that we've got at the moment, you've got a very experienced player there in Paul Hanlon, who will be guiding Ryan Porteous through the games as well. So Porteous will be getting the opportunity to learn. And Porteous is already a very good defender, but you know, there's still lots that he can learn for the people that he's playing against and the people that he's playing alongside. One of the things that occurred to me during the game on Sunday there was that Porteous of late has been quiet, and I don't mean like he's been quiet and that he's been poor. He's not been making any headlines, which I think is probably a really good thing, because, you know, like Porteous, I think, became known when he came into the first team and started getting regular game time. There was always a big challenge there, and it seems like he's maybe got a lot. I don't know if it's calmer or more mature, but he's just doing like a very good defender's job. He's probably putting in his solid and consistent performance as McGinn alongside him. And McGinn's the one that's getting a lot of the credit for it, and rightly so.
That's a good shout. Okay, right. There wasn't much else to talk about for that game, so we'll move on. Graeme, since we got you on, can you give us a wee bit about your background and how did you wind up at Hibs?
Sure. I don't know how far back you want me to go, but when I left school at 16, I was trying, as most young boys would do, to kind of forge a career as a player in professional football, and I keep looking back and trying to revisit, that kind of aspect of life. And I think the main reason I didn't make it as a professional player at the top level was purely and simply a lack of ability, unfortunately. So I seem to have most other things, a good attitude, a good work ethic, but just no the ability to go and make it to a particularly high level. So football gave up on me at 23, I think, long before I was ready to give up on it. So at that point, I guess I kind of tried to maybe follow my dad's footsteps a little bit and taking some of the kind of early coaching qualifications, etc. Found myself working at Celtic for 7.5 years. Firstly in the community department, and then for the last 4.5 years working in the scouting department with John Park. And then worked with the Scottish FA for a couple of years, and that's when I first came across George Craig. So he actually interviewed me for a job at Kilmarnock, which had a football development type role, but a lot to do with kind of formalising a scouting department, mainly for the academy. And at that point, George had said, "Look, maybe this role might not be right for you, but in the future, if I get an opportunity at a club, I'd love to take you in and allow you to go and develop the scout side of things there. And to be fair to George, he was true to his word, and that was 2014 when I joined Hibs.
So, it's, what role did you come into as Hibs then? Was it just purely in the recruitment side of things, Graeme?
Yes, head of player ID and recruitment. So I guess, the first day at Hibs, August window, 1st of August 2014, and, essentially there wasn't really a scouting department at the time. It was kind of myself, an empty desk and a laptop in it, just to try and find players in that first window when Alan Stubbs inherited probably 8 or 9 senior pros. So there was a challenge right from the beginning, I guess. But it's been brilliant, a brilliant club to be at, a lot of fantastic people here, and, a pretty exciting journey, I would suggest, over the last 6 years as well, with a lot of twists and turns involved at the same time.
So joining the Dots there then, was your first signing David Gray?
I wasn't involved in that one. I certainly was communicating with Alan before I formally took the job, so I would probably say Scott Allen was a name I put to him as one of the first, but David Gray was already in. So Don Malonga, the legend that is Don Malonga, arrived at the end of that transfer window as well. So that was the kind of first generation, I guess.
There's some CV,
And how would you describe your responsibilities at the club now? Because obviously the job's changed for that one. You've taken over for George. So what are you responsible for now?
Yeah, I suppose the term sport director, or there's different titles, I guess, at different clubs. So Aberdeen have got a director of football operations. George's title before me was head of football operations. So each and every individual will do the job a little bit differently and maybe focus on different things. And all the clubs maybe look for different things from that role as well. I think if I summarise it, and particularly, I would hope it's been the case certainly over this COVID period in particular, that I think my job is to allow Jack, in this instance, as a head coach, to focus on the things that are really important. So taking his training sessions, picking the players that he wants to sign, picking the players that he wants to pick on a Saturday, and focus on trying to get 3 points at the weekend. So everything else that goes on in a football operation, I want to be there to help and assist and try and do some of the jobs that need done to allow him to focus on these really important things. So without getting overly deep at this moment in time into structure and strategy and all that type of stuff, I think that's probably as good as some as I can give. That I want to be there to support the head coach doing, to allow him to focus on what's most important, which is getting the team to win games, and he's doing a terrific job of that at this moment in time, that's for sure.
Definitely. Obviously, you mentioned COVID there. When that happened, so I think we were due to play St Johnstone, and then all the football got stopped. How did everybody react? Like, what happened at the club at that moment in time?
Yeah, there's two aspects of that, and I keep saying to people, I'm fairly sure George Craig saw this coming, because without a word of a lie, he left me everything in his office, and in the second drawer down of his desk was a painter's mask. So I couldn't believe it. He must have seen this global pandemic on the horizon and got out when he could.
At least he wasn't happy at that.
Very true, very true. But I think the interesting thing about COVID is nobody has been experienced in this world that we're in just now. People have maybe been experienced in, the Satanta deal when that fell through, and the sort of economic implications that had. But in terms of managing our way through this pandemic, with ultimately revenue streams falling off a cliff in the space of 24 hours, nobody's experienced it before. So, I guess my role at the beginning was trying to keep the staff group together. So, we set up a lot of communication, groups so that people could actually just have that sense of community together. That's the one thing I've really noticed about people that work in football, that it's more than a job, it's a vocation. So if you were to say to people, look, you can't come into your work because, for obvious reasons, over this period, it's really important to keep them together, keep them speaking about football, keep them thinking about their job, because it is far more than just a 9-to-5 job for people. So there was a lot of that involved, and then obviously as the summer's progressed, there's been many other conversations and aspects that we've had to deal with. And then in kind of June time, getting the first team back together, the amount of work that was involved in that, and a lot of colleagues at Easter Road writing protocol after protocol about who was allowed to sit where and who was allowed to park the car in what parking space and everything else. It's quite incredible the lengths that they had to get just to get 22 men back running on a football pitch again. Never mind trying to get anywhere near back playing.
And did you get the best parking space?
I just tend to park out the road, I must admit, but I don't think there was actually too many arguments over that either. For all the things the boys can argue with each other about, that wasn't one of them, I must admit.
What's the pettiest argument you've heard, Graeme?
So far, I must admit, our boys genuinely are very good. There's not too much arguing goes on amongst them, but I can't actually think off the top of my head what the last one was.
Probably Martin Boyle chasing. Was it Deutsch that put the spider in the tub and he's...
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Oh, Boyle was taken about abuse for nutmegging Portis in training. That one appeared on social media as well not so long ago. So Martin tends to be in the middle of most of these things when they go on.
I just noticed today that Martin Boyle looks a little bit like Judd Trump.
Well, I tell you this, if that isn't on a blown up picture somewhere in the dressing room by the end of the week, I'll be really disappointed.
One of the things that was written about, Graeme, was when COVID happened, was the academy. And so there were stories kind of came out about how the academy was effectively getting sort of shelved for a period of time. But I take it that's not the case because academy players have been back. What happened with the youth players when things stopped?
Yeah, so again, a lot of the staff were keeping in touch with them in a lot of virtual sessions. So, Steve Kernan was posting a lot on his own social media that the boys could join in with a lot of the sessions that he did. And, some of that work is still continuing. The boys are all back now, at least twice a week. Some of the age groups are back three times a week working with Eddie May and Gareth Evans at this moment in time, Steve Kernan and Alex Ronaldson. So it's great to see them back on a pitch. But, for a long period, they were doing a number of things. We had Paula, the nutritionist, was sending them some meals to try and cook together. So we had quite a bit of that. A few of the under 13, under 14 players in particular have shown their chefing skills and abilities, which was great. Steve Kernan did a lot of physical input. A couple of the coaches did a lot of sort of technical input, and the analysts put together some clips for them to go and look at the kind of tactical development. So, I mean, that's one thing that's really come out of this whole process has been people's creativity and willingness to adapt when life's a bit different to normal. And the young players in particular really embraced it. So, a lot of them were engaging with absolutely everything we were giving them, and obviously really keen to try and get back on the training pitch together as a group. But even while we were away, just desperate to stay connected with the club, which was great. The staff were brilliant at facilitating that.
I definitely felt that that Hibs seemed to get a bit of a rough deal in the media. I think we spoke about it on a previous podcast with the COVID thing, because they were talking about redundancies and people and the club signing players. I think that was the big thing, wasn't it? They were signing players well, they were saying that everything was getting canned when we knew it wasn't. Ron came out and made a statement. I think Leanne came out and made a statement as well. But did that affect anybody behind the scenes? I mean, how did the club feel about that? Because I think we're pretty unanimous in feeling that we were hard done by. I mean, I understand that the media need things to write about, but it just seemed to be that Hibs were the team that they picked out the hat to just keep having a go at. I mean, did that affect anybody behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I must admit, it's Hibs as a club, I don't think tend to react to things that are written in the papers, so we tend to stay quiet unless we've got something meaningful to say. But what that means is whenever there's a story comes out about the academy being shelved, ultimately there's a small number of staff members in here who are already doing a million things, get inundated with emails and requests from parents wondering what's happening. So that was the hardest bit about that story in particular, was actually trying to calm everybody down and make them, let them realise that we were going through some challenges, a lot of conversations were on the go, but it was absolutely our intention to have the academy coming back. We might have just had to, and actually it's interesting now that we're on a call every week with all the other clubs that are involved in the kind of elite level games programme, if you like. So the nine clubs that are considered Scottish FA elite level Club Academy Scotland clubs, and they've all got their own challenges. We're actually back with our teams more nights than most of these other clubs. But as you say, as soon as something like that's written, it just sets so many hairs running that are just unnecessary. And it was difficult for people because, for a lot of these kids, this is their absolute dream, is to be at Hibs and continue through the academy and hopefully progress into the first team. So whenever they read in some media outlet that that's not going to be possible anymore, you can understand their sort of distress. So I was trying to keep a lid on that and make sure that people understood that it was still the club's intention to go along with it. And the other aspect, I mean, Jack's mentioned that even when people talk about, and it is a very sensitive issue for obvious reasons, but, the club going through a consultation process with its staff while still signing players, the narrative probably didn't really take into account the fact of how much money walked out the door in the summer, either the loans that returned to their parent clubs or the players that left. So, Jack's mentioned that we've lost now 9-10 players nearly from last season, and we've signed 3. Nobody really talks about what the difference economically that means. And obviously, without going into private details of arrangements, there are always different ways to fund transfer fees, and that's something that probably wasn't really taken into account either. But, I guess at that point in time, the press have got column inches to fill, and obviously they chose to write what they did. But that's one thing I've noticed about the club. It doesn't really tend to react to speculation in the media. It just tends to keep its head down unless it's got something really meaningful to say. But you're right. These things that are written do have a direct impact on a lot of people. The academy in particular was a real challenge. I don't mind saying for myself personally to try and communicate with so many people and manage your way through that. And I think now it's great. You go out tonight and see, a lot of kids really delighted just to be back training with Hibs and back being part of their team and part of the group again. So it's got ourselves to a relatively positive outcome in the end. But it was a lot of time and effort in the meantime, and a lot of emotions through that period, which probably wasn't really helpful.
You mentioned, Graeme, there that Hibs signed 3 players over the summer. How have the current economic pressures impacted on player recruitment? Has it all been doom and gloom, or has there been some opportunities in there for Hibs to take advantage of?
Yeah, I suppose it's looking at the overall basis of the squad. So, I don't mind telling you, Jack and I would probably have said that we were discussing the possibility of signing 5, maybe 6 players, to offset those that left. So clearly, when the club moves into a different financial position through COVID, you need to revisit that. We brought in what we thought was probably the 3 top targets for the summer. And there was another couple of things to discuss in there as well. And I think it's important to mention it because, the players were asked to contribute and help at the time in respect to wage deferrals, which the way that the group led very well, I must say, by David Gray, handled that conversation was first class. But even the players that we signed, and we made a commitment at the time not to recruit other players while the guys were deferring wages. But what the new signings were willing to do, and I don't think I'm kind of riding roughshod over any confidences here, but what they were willing to do was actually have their salaries paid in the August pay run, to date the contracts a bit further down the line so that they weren't getting paid full money while others were getting paid, less than that. And I think that, one, for me, it showed the mark of the people that was coming into the building. It showed the mark of the group that was here that they were willing to come towards the club and help by deferring wages for a 4-month period. But I think that was a pretty important aspect of the summer as well, that those that came into the group were really understanding of that, really appreciative of the dynamic within the group, and really happy to play their part to support. So that was the first part that we thought those 3 areas of the pitch were areas that we thought we needed to strengthen. There were 3 players that we absolutely prioritised and said we really wanted to bring in. And obviously at the times that we did, they were keen to come to the club and happy to come within the kind of realms of the budget that we had available at the time. So that's where it's gone. And obviously there's another couple of bits of movement in the summer flow, which we probably expected to exit because he displayed a willingness to do that. And Adam Jackson, who came towards us, wanting to move back down to England, which is something that maybe wasn't quite as expected. But that's just a normal summer, to be honest. That's just a normal transfer window that you need to be able to flex a little bit and react to these things that happen. And I'm fairly sure there'll be some more movement between now and the end of the window as well.
Just one wee further question on that. You mentioned players' character there, and the new guys in particular, and deferring salaries again until contracts in August. How important is a player's character in your or Hibs' decision to pursue them and sign them?
I would say it's really important, but I must admit it's probably the hardest thing to judge before you get somebody in. And again, I don't mind telling you, we've tried to review a lot of decisions that we've made and a lot of things that we've done in the 6 years that we've been here. But clearly now we've got quite a bank of players that we've signed over that 6-year period. And again, I'm being very upfront here. Obviously, we've received a lot of criticism, from supporters in particular and from the wider media about the perceived success or otherwise of the recruitment last summer. So that prompted us into looking at all the signings we've made and said, look, as players that are successful at Hibs is there something that we can identify with them? So are those that come as single people, is there anything that tells us there? Are those that come with a family, do they settle quicker? Are those that have played in Scotland before or played in Britain before preferable to those that haven't? We looked at probably about 15 or 20 different things. And the one thing that came out, even with evaluate hindsight, has been a pretty determining factor was character and mindset. But it's actually probably one of the hardest things to judge before somebody comes in, because you'll ask for, due diligence. You'll speak to people who have worked with them. You'll speak to people who's shared the dressing room with players. But you tend to get quite similar responses. Great guy, good trainer, brilliant character, great about the dressing room. But I suppose what you really want to know is, and it's interesting that you guys have picked up on it, but how are the guys in the last 5 minutes of a game when times are a bit tough, or the opposition's throwing balls in the box, or you're just needing somebody to go and dig you out a hole? That's the type of character on the pitch that essentially is quite hard to judge before they come in, how they're going to react to your environment. But the same thing, and I must say, that's been the one thing that's been consistent about our whole group this summer, players and staff. It's led incredibly well by Jack and his coaching team, but I credit all the staff that have come back, because it is a smaller staff group that's returned this summer than left in March before lockdown. Their application, their willingness to roll their sleeves up, their willingness to do more than potentially what could be expected of them has been great. And the player group as well. I mean, even simple things and things that might sound really silly, but we asked them at the beginning of lockdown for COVID-related reasons to take their own kit home and wash them. Not an issue. We asked them to, not eat their lunch together in the training centre like they'd been used to doing. They were getting Debs, who's our chef that caters for the away matches. She's in there with a kind of takeaway van at the side of the pitch, and they're getting a wrap after training. All of these things you just embraced because they're just a good group of people. And even when I'm going towards them, asking to sort of defer salaries and do various other things that I've asked them to do, at every single point they've really embraced those conversations and worked with me to try and come up with solutions. So I can't ask any more of them from that perspective. And as I say, I genuinely, from a personal perspective, I think it's great that they're achieving at this moment in time the success they deserve, and absolutely long may it continue.
If I could,
sorry, Matty, you want to ask?
Well, I was going to say that with character being such an important measure when you're looking at signings, I know Messi's just become available because he's agitated for a move from Barcelona. So can we get a record that we're not going for him because he's a troublemaker?
No, I honestly, I can't believe you actually blown my biggest exclusive. I was going to announce that at some point there on that we were trying to do a deal for him towards the end of the window, but you've bust me on that one. That'll be in the back page of the newspapers tomorrow, unfortunately.
Get Messi on a free.
My biggest worry was if when he leaves Barcelona, are we going to be able to keep a hold of Deutsch if they come sniffing?
Well, that's probably even more of a worry, I must admit. I don't mind telling you, when you speak to agents, there's one or two that you build a relationship and one or two that you maybe don't speak to all that often. I remember my third year in speaking, and it was a player that was probably miles out of our league, but similar situation. He left a club when he was a free agent, so I phoned up, and sometimes my line can be, I hear he's got family in Edinburgh, or I hear he really likes the city, or he's really fond of the place, so that may be a way that you can go to the player and try and convince him to come to Hibs. And he phoned me about 10 minutes later. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, the player's never been to Edinburgh, no got family anywhere in the vicinity. And he said, in fact, I don't think he even really wants to come to Scotland, but I've tried it once or twice and got a wee bit further down the line with one or two than I might have thought. But in this instance, it didn't get me beyond the first stage, unfortunately.
Oh, well. See if I take it back to the academy for a wee minute, Graeme. One of the questions, so I'd said to a couple of fans that you were coming on the show tonight and said, is there anything you want to ask? And one of the questions that came up was, we took the decision to come away from playing Scottish clubs with the youth team. I'm not sure if that was last season or the season before, and we were playing teams from other countries. What's the plan now? Because obviously that's not going to be as possible as it was before.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I could probably sit forever chatting about the academy and that kind of development squad group. And there's been loads and loads of thought and conversations. And the biggest difficulty is one size doesn't fit all when it comes to developing players and transitioning them at those ages. So I think, long story short, there's two really difficult transitions for young people. One is those that come out of the academy and go into the full-time environment. So this year, we're delighted to have 8 or 9 of the under-16 group come in. Now, that's the first time that's happened since I've been here. Normally, and it's a bit of a prerequisite that some clubs will say when you get to that under 16, under 17 age, they'll take 5 or 6 of the best players out of that team. We haven't. We've only ever signed players that we genuinely think have got a chance to become professional players. So in previous years, it's been 1 or 2 or 3. This year, we're up at 7 and 8 from that 2004 age group that we've made offers of professional contracts to. But even within that group, they're all different. So some of them already we're saying as a 16, 17-year-old kid, we want to try and get them in the Lowland League as a loan to play against men. Others were saying maybe still they should be playing under 18 football on a Friday night for at least 6 months or a year. And then obviously as you take that forward, over the next few age groups, we're having similar conversations. So for some of them, going and playing on loan would be the best thing for them to do, either in Scotland or elsewhere. For others, it's actually trying to keep them here so they might be able to go and train with the first team and try and get in the first team that way. And that's the biggest difficulty. So we did pull out the reserve league, probably because it was still transitioning from that under 20 league. So, and again, Paul joined the club. Paul Heckenbottom joined the club last sort of February time, and it probably took him about 3 months to watch the boys playing reserve football and get a competitive game. Because they were actually quite a strong group, and that was one of the biggest reasons why we said, look, let's try and get this group out on loan if we can, and playing a handful of really selective games against different opposition so we can test them in different ways. And again, the guys that have come through that, Jamie Gullen was part of that group, Fraser Murray was part of that group, Josh Doig played a lot of those games, Porteous played a handful of them early on, obviously, before he got in the first team and had a couple of injuries. Ollie Shaw played in a lot of those games. So, Ryan Shanley is another one who's coming through now. So there was a lot of that group that played and had those different experiences. And I guess that's just what we want to try and expose the players to, is loads of different experiences and loads of different environments to help them develop.
Cool. The next question was about recruitment. So you touched on it before. What's the general process when we go to recruit a player? And what's your starting point with it, and how does that evolve?
So I think that the starting point is knowing what's in your building, and I know that might sound a really obvious starting point, but obviously, you look at the squad as it sits just now. Who's coming out of contract over the next maybe 12 or 24 months. Also who's underneath the first team group. So, clearly on the board this summer, Josh Doig was there as a young player who we thought would at least get the opportunity to go and train with the team. Ryan Shanley's another one that I'd mentioned as a striker. So in some of the areas that we might have been quite light at first team level in the summer, these guys had the opportunity to come in and train with the first team. So before you look externally, the most important place to look is where you are at the moment, where the gaps are. Can you fill any of those gaps from the academy or the development squad? So then after that, a lot of it is down to research. So, we've not really had a history of paying transfer fees for a lot of players. So predominantly you're looking at free transfers. So easy to find out who's out of contract, and then start particularly looking in the Scottish market first, looking in the English market next, and then from there looking at certain countries abroad and seeing who's coming out of contract either for the winter window or the summer window. And again, from there, it's just a big process of getting those players' details logged, having a look on a software system initially called Y-Scout, which is a great piece of software. So it allows you to, for example, in the past, we've looked at centre-backs who are dominant. So if you take all the names that might be on your list at any given time, within 5 minutes on this product, you can press one button and it shows you every time they've headed the ball for the last 2 seasons. So, within 5 or 10 minutes, you can get a real clear indication about whether the attribute you're looking for is something that they possess. So then from there, I guess it's just a case of continuing to filter, trying to watch the games live as much as we can, speaking to the agent and seeing whether we might be an option for the player, whether they would be willing and able to come within a budget. And obviously, the head coach is always front and centre in that process as well to make sure he's comfortable with the way the process is going and what players we're looking at and prioritise.
So see, when you get one like that, and you've got all this work going on in the background to identify players. So I think about Neil Lennon's time at the club, where we brought in Chris Commons, Effie Ambrose, and Grant Holt, 3 examples. I would imagine they probably weren't the players that were scouted that way. Were they a case of having the opportunity because of Neil Lennon that you were able to sign them? or were they identified through the process?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, well, Effie was an interesting one. At the time, I think I remember right, we were playing a League Cup game, or a cup game, I'm sure we had to play. And at the time, it was either Darren McGregor, one of the centre-backs get suspended that day. I think it was Jordan Foster might have got injured, and we were just in desperate need to go in. It was quite a big game, I'm sure. We were playing a quarter-final or something the following week, and we needed a defender. And literally on that Friday before we played on the Saturday, Effie Ambrose moved to Blackburn, fell through because of a work permit issue. So, it seemed an obvious one when we got a phone call saying, look, a couple of things have happened in the game today. What centre-backs have we got? A centre-back the manager's worked with before, it can give us a real clear steer on whether he thinks he would be willing to come, able to play in the team, and he's moved to Blackburn's fallen through a couple of days before. So, that one was almost just a perfect storm of circumstance for him to come in the first place. What probably allowed him to stay was his ability to actually gain a UK passport if he stayed in Scotland for an extra 6 months or a year. So that played a big factor in him initially staying with us on a permanent basis for that passport for him and his family, which was again something that we uncovered as part of when he was with us. But no, I mean it's an interesting question, Mike, because it can be a number of things, and sometimes it is, and that's one thing I would always say, it's not for me or anybody else in recruitment to force our opinion on a head coach, and I must admit, I've seen and heard stories that particularly with sort of Neil and others that Graeme Mathie or somebody else would have the final say. I would love to see that scenario where I go to Neil Lennon and say, you must sign this guy. I don't know how long that conversation would have lasted. But in fairness to Neil and Alan and Paul and Jack, it always starts with good conversations about where the squad is. I mean, the one I would share, even as a player progressing through the academy right enough, but when we look at what budget we've got, we did this project with Neil. We've got a magnetic board with all the players with little magnets on them. So we've actually got the starting player in every position, the cover player, and a development player. So that helps us to try and plan, who might be next in line to come through. And it was Ryan Porteous that we spoke about. So Ryan was he was just back from his loan at Edinburgh City, coming into that pre-season, and he was in that development squad box, if you like, as a central defender. Yeah. So we had Effie, I'm sure, was signed, Darren McGregor and Paul Hanlon, 3 experienced centre-backs who were more than capable of playing at the level. And that was a question, it wasn't for George Craig or Graeme Mathie to say to Neil Lennon, do not sign a centre-back because this kid Porteous is going to be a player. The first question is, can Porteous take the cover position? Because if he can, pick whoever you want out your starting 3 central defenders, whether it's Hanlon and McGregor or Hanlon and Effie or Effie, it doesn't matter. But can Porteous play a part as a cover player? And if the answer's yes, that's brilliant. Because what we can do is spend a wee bit more money on a striker or a winger or another position if we maybe don't have a cover player to come in or a youth player to progress. So that's how all of these conversations start. And, as with everything, you're trying to balance your budget and make your money go as effectively as you can. So the more players that you've got from within, it means the more money you can spend on other areas.
And thinking of some more recent sort of transfers, did we at least get a finder's fee for Funso Ojo and Ross McCrory?
Oh, listen, I don't know what to say on these ones. Right, that's still a bit of a sore point, I must admit. So I'll just.
How does it feel when something like that happens, Graeme? Because I think when we saw the press, I mean, the press had virtually reported them as not quite done and dusted, but not kicking the backside off it. How does it feel for your side of it when something like that happens? Not necessarily specific to those two, but
especially for all the work, because we don't see all the work that goes in behind it. We just see, we're interested. There's been a bid put in. Either the player's interested or not in any signs there, but there must be so much more behind the scenes that will hit you hard, if you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite pragmatic on that, because I think that's probably what you sign up for when you get involved in recruitment. Probably 90% of your work in recruitment doesn't actually result in somebody walking through the door. That's just the nature of it. There's so much that goes into, just as I've spoken about, the research, the profiling, the analysis, everything else before you get to that point. I probably need to watch what I'm saying here, but I guess my only comment on those two in particular would be, I never, I suppose I go into negotiations just being really upfront and honest with people, and all I ever expect is the same in return. So if somebody wants to speak to another club, or somebody doesn't want to come here because for whatever reason, all I would expect them to do is tell me. And that's so. I probably don't want to say too much more on that in case I get myself into bother. But that's the bit that probably hurts the most. Is if you go into a negotiation being honest with people, you build relationships with people, you speak very openly with people, and they don't show you the same courtesy back. That's the bit that gets me. Now, whether they think they've made the right decision or not by going to another club, that's almost secondary to that aspect. I just think just deal with people probably on a human level, make your decision, and wish you all the best. Simple as that. I mean, I'll even use it very openly that Greg Docherty's a player that did very well for us in January. We were certainly expressing an interest to have him back, but I think Greg was pretty clear that he saw his future in England. So there's absolutely no issues with that. I text Greg as soon as the Hull move was announced. Now, whether I believe in my heart of hearts we might have been a better move for him in his career than Hull, that's irrelevant. Greg felt that Hull was the best place, or England was the best place for his career, and I sent him a text that night and wished him all the best, and I meant it because he was very clear from the beginning. There was no ambiguity. Whilst we tried to speak to him a few times to see what his thoughts were, he was pretty determined that that's where he wanted to go. No issues. But I think when people behave in another way, that's the one bit of the job I think that really irks me. So, as I say, I've probably said too much already, so I'll leave it there.
That's understandable. And the last thing I wanted to ask about on recruitment was how to phrase this question. Kevin Nisbet, is he the sort of prototype Hibs transfer going forward? So you're looking at a sort of up-and-coming Scottish talent, bags of potential that we can pick up at a cost, but probably look to sell them on for a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the balance you want within your squad. And I know, Matt, you were going to speak about sort of Ron and some of the things that's important to him. And, we look with that within the squad. So we do want to be a club that transitions young players out of the academy and gets them in the team. So Josh Doig coming into starting 11 has been great. Ryan Porteous being in the team is fantastic from that perspective. We also want to be a club that can actually do exactly what you've just said. John McGinn's the perfect one for us, so bring him in at a relatively low cost, develop him over a number of years and actually give him the opportunity to kick his career on in the club benefits. And that is a challenge, I guess, is to try and balance all these type of things, because at the same time you need your, and I know you'll mention again, but your experienced players, whether they've come through your club or those that you can bring in from elsewhere to balance out that squad. And ultimately, I said it right at the beginning, you want your team to win. So getting players out of the academy, bringing in young players that you can develop and hopefully sell, and winning games. It's no easy to do all these things at the one time, but we're certainly trying our best, that's for sure.
Next thing there was about the managers and how do you select a manager. So what happens when a manager's about to leave the club for whatever reason, whether it's, I suppose, a surprise when Lennon went, or when maybe the writing was on the wall with Heckingbottom left. What's it like in your role? Like, how do you gear up to start preparing for recruiting a new manager?
Yeah, so George Craig was always great with myself. So I think my job at Hibs has probably been a wee bit more than what your stereotypical, head of player recruitment job has been. So he's had me involved in basically every managerial appointment to a greater or lesser extent. And every manager appointment for us has been a kind of evolution of the process. So Neil, and again, I can probably speak about this quite openly, to be honest. So Neil was at a time where we knew him and his qualities. I mean, I'd worked with him. He was the first team manager at Celtic when I was there. His agent sort of gave us a call, and probably one of these conversations, I experienced them quite a bit, where everybody sounds each other out and you can dance around the handbags a little bit. But it kind of sounded like if we had an interest in speaking to him, he might have an interest in speaking to us. So, I was able to vouch for Neil at that point and say, look, he's had success when pressure's on, and it was for us in that year in the Championship. We really had to get promoted. He achieved success at a team that was perceived as being the biggest in the league at the time, that had to go and continue to win. So there was a narrative that said Neil was the right fit at that time, and that was one, as I say, that came probably a little bit more from that conversation initially, albeit we had a separate process ongoing at the same time. Probably at that point, and again, I don't know whether I'm boring you guys with some of this chat, but we were starting to write a document called the DNA document. So it was really what our perception was of what Hibs could be or should be. And I think it probably came from the realisation that in the Championship, every decision that we wanted to make as a kind of senior management team, if you want to call it that, was all about getting out of the league. So, every investment you made, signings that you made, everything was about winning the league, getting promoted. Now, somebody could say whether it was successful or not, but, the cup win undoubtedly helped us in that period. But we get out of the league. So as soon as you get there, you then need to reset and say, well, what does success look like for Hibs now? And if you'd asked the general supporter base, I bet some would have said, look, we should be up there challenging at the top end of the league. We should be in European places. Others would have said, well, maybe top 6. Some others might have said, well, look, actually, can we build towards being the top 6 and going from there? Everybody might have had a different opinion. So for us, it was important to document the type of things that we wanted the club to be. And that actually was down to even the style of football. So, when you talk about recruiting coaches, you can't recruit coaches that want to play on the back foot. It's just the Hibs fans wouldn't have that. It's not what this club's been about. You want to try, and again, the things that we looked at, we want to try and bring coaches in that are willing to play young players. We wanted to bring coaches in who have achieved a degree of success in their career somewhere, because that's actually what we think the club can do, whether it's a cup win or Europe or whatever it may be. So every time we have actually recruited a head coach since then, these are the type of things that we've been thinking about. And Jack's recruitment was undoubtedly, the most sort of evolved that the process has been. My colleague in performance analysis, Calvin Charlton, did a lot of work using a company called Instat. So without going into bore you with the kind of ins and outs of it, but really looking at being really deliberate about saying, well, if we want to be a team that, in the words we used at the time, we have been dynamic, adaptable, and attack-minded, fast-paced. So, can we actually use this Instat product and say, well, what type of teams in Europe play in that type of way? And it allows you then, so whether a manager comes in, he has happened with an agent saying, look, here's 3 or 4 names you should think about, whether it was us and our own knowledge that we could then benchmark against what that meant, or whether it was actually just the data itself that said, and Calvin was great, he was coming in and saying, look, there's a couple of coaches in Europe, we've never heard of them before. Funnily enough, one of them got the Barnsley job, so clearly they had a bit of a similar process about it. And they were looking for similar things. But it was good because when we were then going able to go to the board and say, look, here is a short list of managers and head coaches that we are recommending, they were able to see that type of work for themselves. And Jack, with his time at Sunderland, scored highly in all of these things. Willingness to play young players, achieved a degree of success in his career, particularly at St Mirren when he won the league, and arguably avoiding relegation in that first year was a great achievement as well. And has transitioned players and sold them, developed them and sold them for money. And Calvin's data showed that his teams were set up and willing to play in a style which we thought related really well to the job at Hibs. And I think it's great that he's now getting the credit for all his time at Hibs from November. That I know there was a bit put out on our channels this week, and some of the papers picked up on it. But the points total since he came in has been great, and as I say, long may it continue.
I think it's the most wins and most points outside of Glasgow since he came in. Aye, it's cracking. Ron Gordon coming in sort of changed the perception of the club. What was that like from inside the club, and how have things changed since he's taken over?
Yeah, Ron's been in just over a year now, and I must admit, for him buying into a football club, I think he came in, with some great ideas, and he's got unbelievable energy. That's the one thing I would still say consistently. He's got fantastic energy, but he's had some year when you think about actually buying into a football club in a different country. What a year he's chosen to do it. There was obviously on an internal side a challenge when we're transitioning a head coach, which is always a difficult time, and then coming in the midst of a global pandemic and trying to sort of lead that and manage that from the other side of the Atlantic, because he can't travel and get here and help us was really difficult. But he's here now. I believe he's planning to stay for a good period of time and work with a lot of people here. But Ron's great, and it's actually, I'm quite an open-minded person. So for somebody to come in, it's his first time really involved in football. He asks some brilliant questions. He gets us to think about things that sometimes you maybe don't think about. He's really challenging us to apply a lot of business principles to a lot of areas of the club. And actually just encouraging us at times to go and take risks and be, open-minded and, particularly in recruitment. I know that's something he would love us to look at as well, is how can we do it well? How can we be a club that recruits really well consistently, looks in different areas, and he's shown already he's willing to back us to do it.
Can I ask just a question about Ron Gordon and his involvement in relieving Paul Heckingbottom of his duties. Was that something that
Let it go, John. Let it go.
No. Was that an executive decision, or was that something that was delegated to the senior management team?
Is this an internet rumour you're asking me to quash or otherwise here? Is that?
No, it's just a general curiosity. There's loads of inner workings, I think, that football fans often speculate about. But no one really knows what the internal goings on are at a football club. And I've mentioned it a couple of times in the last few podcasts, and I think you alluded to it earlier with some of the newspaper chatter with the youth academy and what have you. And my sort of mantra is it's nothing's official till it's Hibs official. And I think that's just, that's my sort of go-to because I don't know the internal workings. So it was just a general curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I probably don't necessarily want to go into too much depth and detail here. I think my only comment on that would be sometimes there's kind of a narrative starts presenting itself. Now, look, ultimately, everybody in football, and including myself in this, particularly in this role, is judged on performance and results. That's the bottom line. But it's difficult to transition that post within the club. And sometimes, and again, I'm not going to be down on the media, but when you read headlines, it almost sounds easy. You remove somebody from that position and suddenly the world changes and everything gets better overnight. And it doesn't work that way because there's, internally there's loads of upheaval over that period. And again, I credit George in terms of building a structure at the club that's actually able to provide some sort of resistance to that a little bit. So, obviously Eddie and Grant Murray in particular, Stephen Whittaker at the last time were able to step in and take the team for that period. And there was obviously that wee bit of resilience within the structure, but it is difficult, so all the plans that you might have had for a January window working with a certain head coach then go out the window when you try and bring another one into that environment. So it's not easy, and it's not a decision I don't think that anybody takes lightly, because that's the other bit that but being involved in football, what you realise you're dealing with all the time is human beings. Footballers are human beings and they'll make mistakes on the pitch. All the staff are human, and sometimes their decisions are judged one way or the other by the bounce of a ball or a refereeing decision, late on in a game. I think we're lucky now to have the start we've had to the season, and there's been some fine lines along the way. Certainly from a biased perspective, I would say that we've absolutely deserved them with the way that the players have performed and sort of worked for each other within that. But that's the harsh reality of life in football, isn't it? If you take Motherwell, there's a lot of their performances have been really widely applauded for the way they've played, but at this moment in time, they don't have many points on the board, and that's a tricky bit. That's a tricky bit. So no, as I say, I don't really want to go into the kind of inner workings of how that works, but
yeah.
It's not an easy conversation to actually get to the point of wanting to remove somebody from a post. It really isn't, for a number of reasons. But so yeah, I don't want to say too much more on that, I guess.
No, that's fine. Another question I was hoping to ask was, you mentioned something there about I think something along the lines of trading in human beings when it comes to like transfers and what have you. And that reminded me of an article where you were quoted about Josh Vela and how he struggled to settle in at Easter Road. And what I wanted to ask in the back of that was, what do Hibs do to help players settle in at Easter Road in Edinburgh and the wider area?
Yeah, so this is a pretty big one at the minute. So one of Ron's aspects in his sort of strategic plan was being known as being a players' club. And I think I'm probably going right back to your first question, Maya, about what is the job of a sport director. So for me, it's trying to make a lot of these plans that you would write and a lot of these documents you have come alive and being really deliberate about what that means. So to be a players' club, so Ron's vision is that that anybody that comes to Hibs says that this is the best period in their career. So, and actually, I think there's an argument to say that there's quite a few players that might say that have even joined over the last 6 years. So, for example, I know Marvin Bartley still speaks really highly of his time here and loves, calls himself a supporter. I dare say, and I hope for a number of very obvious reasons, that John McGinn's got at least one more big move in him, hopefully in the not too distant future. But he's another one that I would absolutely say loved his time at the club and looks upon his time here with great fondness. So, and I think that's one of the areas where we want to be really deliberate about being this players' club. So a couple of things, in terms of when people come, we've now got a dedicated player care support individual, and that person is really there to look after all aspects of a player's life off the park. So, when they get here, picking them up from a train station or an airport or wherever that might be, organising accommodation for them to be in for a period of time, making sure they understand the kind of area they're in and what players are near them, and making those connections. Just sometimes simple things, even that you don't think about, players coming from abroad, getting them a bank account, a national insurance number, getting them set up so that their tax, etc., is okay from the beginning. And again, there's loads of different things involved in that. Make sure their family's settled, that their kids are access to school or nursery or dentists, doctors. There's loads of things there. Actually, Tracy Smith does a brilliant job, because this is one of the areas I think found really interesting. For me, a player's family who come to a match ordinarily when it was a bit more normal, but that's probably an even more daunting experience to walk into the players' lounge for the first time than a player walking into a changing room. Because at least the player getting into the changing room knows he's got something in common with the rest of the guys here, because you're all there to play football, you're all there to be teammates, and probably somebody once or twice removed that knows that person. But a partner or a family member walking into the players' lounge, it's different and it's difficult. And Tracy does a brilliant job of actually making sure that, so the player knows, right, that the family member's connected with Tracy before the game. She'll send them, show them where to sit, introduce them to some people that might be a similar age or stage or a family or whatever else. And, there's just little things like that we're trying to do now and just be a bit more deliberate about. But no, I was on an English FA do a talent ID pathway, and one of their courses was talking a lot about club values. And one of the things he spoke about was Brad Friedel can still calls himself a Liverpool player. Doesn't matter where he went in his career after being there. That was just what he sensed was the club that he was closest to. And I would love us to be a club that people say the same about.
I love that. It's one of the things as a people manager myself in my business life. It's all about having folk that want to work with you. Like to have that connection. So to hear him doing that in the football sense is, I love that.
Yeah, one of the things that we do even before we bring guys in is just a very basic recruitment video. So the media department pulled it together, but it's really powerful. It shows Easter Road on a busy match day. It shows some of the team playing, shows the training centre, shows the city of Edinburgh. So really that video should appeal to anybody, whether you're a guy at the tail end of your career that just wants the buzz of being in a proper, and I mean it when I say a proper football club and a proper football environment, whether you're a young player that thinks you can go and be the next John McGinn, whether you're somebody with a family that wants to think about putting people in school, this club's genuinely got everything for so many different types, and it's, putting it together in that wee 5-minute video is a great hook. And it's actually got, as again, when I talk about getting beyond stage one with an agent, sometimes people, maybe don't really consider Scotland as a viable option. But you send them that video and right away they're saying, that looks like a brilliant opportunity. I really want to explore that.
Grand. So we're kind of heading towards the end of this, Graeme. So a couple of kind of quicker fire questions. What change are you most proud of that you've made at the club?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I must admit, and it's not any false modesty here, but I think the things that I take the most pleasure from is actually when you get to work with others and good people. I've taken a lot of pleasure from some of the things that have happened this summer because it's been difficult and challenging, and it's working with really good people. And I've said it 2 or 3 times now, but you see the measure of people when things are tough. And I've certainly been really proud to be the leader of this football department over this summer period because I've seen some brilliant things that people have really stepped up.
And what changes would you prioritise next? Like, what's your biggest next win?
Well, one of the things I think I've spoken about is actually trying to get our young people more opportunities abroad. So some of the loan players to go abroad and experience football in different areas. I think that would be great because it's something that isn't largely done in Scottish football at the moment. Most of the loan moves tend to be domestic. So once the world gets back to normal, I'd love to see more young players going abroad.
Nice one. That's all the questions for me. Guys, you got any questions for Graeme?
I should probably let Brian and Craig have a go. I feel like I've asked quite a few.
I don't think I've asked a single question ever. This is the quietest I've ever been. I would.
You can come back again, Graeme. You're more than welcome.
I would say I heard Jack Ross say on Sunday, and it was great to hear. He spoke about how I think the interviewer asked if the players were going to get carried away in joint talk, etc. And he spoke about how humble the squad of players were, and in a sense, rather than getting carried away, Jack almost had to say that he had to reinforce to them, you guys are a really good squad. So I would think on the basis of that, Graeme, if you had a choice, would you rather have a fish supper or a pizza?
I wondered where you're going at that, but I absolutely didn't expect that.
No, that to be fair, it just came into my head.
For your first question now as well, it wasn't a bad one to finish on.
No, seriously, fish supper or pizza?
Is that a special fish supper or just a normal fish supper?
No, normal. No, let's not bend the rules. Normal.
Okay.
Normal
I would go for a normal fish supper in that case.
He's the man for me, Matthew. We can come back.
Although, from somebody that lives in Ayrshire, actually, I'm really enjoying salt and sauce through in the East Coast, I must admit.
I get that, and I.
Does that feature in the Hibs recruitment video?
No, we're trying to keep the boys. In fact, Paul, our nutritionist, would slaughter me for saying that, so you need to maybe edit this bit
out. Graeme, you got any questions for us?
No, listen, guys, from I suppose, basically, what are you thinking about the new world we're living in? That was one thing I didn't cover. I must admit, we're all missing the supporters not being at the stadium, and that's definitely one of the best bits of the job for me, is seeing that all the supporters together and that sort of community around about match day. So, how are you guys feeling not being able to get to Easter Road and watch your team live?
If I could just jump in there, I think Sunday, where there was a lot of focus on the performance on Sunday, rather than the result, but it's if Hibs had a strong away back in there, winning the game with a penalty in injury time, and obviously the scenes that would have unfolded on the back of that, a few thousand Hibs fans going absolutely bonkers, I think that would have possibly deflected even further away from the performance, because you would have just seen the sheer scenes of jubilation and joy and bedlam.
Exuberance.
Exactly, yes. To quote Mr. Petrie, exuberance. So I think that's taken away a lot of the enjoyment of football, and that possibly, I would say, is direct relation to the standard of football we're seeing at the moment across Scottish football. Games are 0-0 or 1-0, or it's very cagey, and I think not having the fans there is it's causing a big impact on that. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but to me, it's taken away a lot of what Scottish football's about.
It's saving me an absolute fortune in fuel, by the way, because I travel over for Helensburgh or Portsmouth, every weekend. But no, I mean, I think for me, I agree with you that they say like football's nothing without the fans, but I think the club have been at the forefront in. This is when my dyslexia kicks in, my lack of English skills. But I think the club have been at the forefront, and is it maybe projecting the club or projecting football to the fans? Like, you always feel like even though we didn't have Hibs and we didn't have the games there was always contact and the bringing out of the strips and the thank you NHS. I think the club have always been kind of at one with the fans, if you know what I mean. They've been thinking along the same wavelength, and the way that bringing in like a media team and upping the Hibs TV, and I mean, I'm personally, I know you use our season ticket holders, being able to watch it from home with your family, and so I think it's the overused term is unprecedented times, but I think Hibs have ridden it as well as they can, and I think that the lack of fans might maybe affect, players and games and all that sort of stuff. But I think because the club as a whole have been together with both the fans, the staff, the backroom staff, and with the players, it's projected onto the pitch, like, and as Graeme said earlier, long may it continue.
Yeah.
Nice one. Okay, guys, I think we'll wrap up there for the evening. Graeme, thanks very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to the reaction to this one. Craig, John, Brian, thanks for joining us as always.
Thanks very much for having us, guys. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
I'm subscribing now, so I'll be listening going forward as well.
That's good.
Normally it's not as as PC
Right.
as this, by the way. So
No, listen, I don't mind telling you, I was concerned, having listened to Kieran Powell's before I come on, I was concerned with some of the questioning you were going to get down, so I think I got up lightly, I don't mind telling you.
I've been gaffer taped for most of this, don't worry.
We had to pay Brad a ridiculous amount of money to keep him on his best behaviour. Okay, well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you on Thursday for our episode of Short Bangers.
Well, they trailed me down when I broke free. I drank all the whiskey in Tennessee. I don't drink water, no,